Hey, hi, welcome back to Gold Derby. I'm Christopher Rosen. I'm joined by Priyanka Chopra Jonas, the co-star and executive producer of The White Tiger, which premieres Friday on Netflix. It's in theaters now in limited release. Priyanka, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I wanted to start by asking you a little about your interest in the project. I know you had, I read an interview where you said you were so excited when you heard the book was being adapted into a feature film. And I guess, can you talk a little about your interest and what was it about the book that really struck a chord with you and made you want to pursue the film?
First of all, hi, Chris, and thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor. Second, I think I loved the book when I read it. It had come out in 2008, and I thought it was hard hitting and provocative and sarcastic and funny and dark. And I remember it was such a fast page turner for me that when I read actually on Twitter, it was in one of the trade magazines that The White Tiger was being adapted by Ramin Barani, who as was a director I admired, but also the book was dedicated to him. So I knew that he had, inside knowledge about the book. And then I read that it was being adapted for Netflix, and so I called my agents immediately. I remember this was like early in the morning. I was just about had my coffee, and I was like, guys, you've got to, call the producers, offer my services. I really want to attach as an EP for two reasons. One, I really do think that this book is a self reflection on society, which is very, very pivotal and relevant to right now. Especially after COVID, we've seen the divide between the have and the have nots that has become so apparent with this last year. And this book is sort of a reflection of how privileged society is desensitized to the rest of the world. I mean, how many times have we driven past a homeless shelter and not really ever thought about it? So it's sort of a conversation around that, but also it's a provocative, entertaining, dark thriller, and I was really looking for an immersive experience. I've had an opportunity to play really incredible parts in India, and the Hindi movies that I did. I've worked with amazing filmmakers, and I was really seeking the opportunity to do a dramatic part here as well. So this kind of checked all my boxes.
I want to talk a little about your character Pinky. I found really fascinating, especially with what you're saying. Like, I think you're right. The film obviously is so about like the economic divide and stuff, and she's a character who in India is very much an elite member of elite society, right, and stuff. And then we find out through her a backstory. She's an immigrant in America, and her parents run a bodega, and she like was learned in her basement. I think she said, like or like really so like maybe a traditional immigrant story in America, but where she would not be part of the elite class. And I guess playing a character like that who has a foot in both those worlds, I found really fascinating, especially with what the movie's about. So I was wondering if you could talk a little about like that aspect of her character and like like that part of it. I found really really interesting.
I think to me it was actually very interesting because it was the opposite for me. I've grown up predominantly in India, even though I went to high school in the US for a little bit. And I'm basically Indian, whereas I was playing a girl who was American. I've done that in the past before, of course, but that's a very different experience. And I had to come into the movie and sort of erase my knowledge of the complexities of India and the complexities of the economic divide, especially in developing countries, because I kind of grew up with it. Here I was playing this girl who comes in from being really woke and having sort of a perspective of relating with Balram and saying, I'm the Balram of America, basically, is what she was saying. And she said, I relate with you. My circumstances defined my future too, but I pulled myself out of it. And it came from a great place, but it was also sort of like a little bit privileged. The vortex of poverty is a very complex thing. It's not as easy as choosing to want to get out of it. And here was this girl who comes from America and says that, my parents worked in a bodega, but you had a roof over your head. You didn't have to worry about your next meal. So it was a really different thing for me also to sort of inhabit. And at the same time, I think she was also conveniently woke, right? Like when it was convenient to her, she stepped back And she was like, all right, I'll let you take the hit. So it's such a testament to the gray of human nature. It's no one is, as much as you try to live on the positive side or on the good side, you're good till it's convenient. And I think all the characters in this movie are so gray that it's about the complexity of human nature more than, a kind of people or a culture.
Yeah, for sure. I was, when you talked to Ramin about the movie, when you got, when you got to talk to him, I guess was that like some of the conversations you had, or like what were you hoping to, what was it like talking to him about what you wanted to accomplish with the adaptation, I guess, for audiences?
I think the one thing that we wanted to, and Ramin was very clear about from the beginning, is that he really wanted to keep the pace of the novel in the adaptation. This is a piece of fictional marvel, I think. I'm a big fan of Arvind Adiga and his writing, the novelist, and this was a Man Booker Prize winning novel. It was a New York Times bestseller. And I think it was very important to me specifically, and who am I to tell Ramin Barani how to make movies? But and I think for him as well, the tone of the movie was very important. So you see, the music was such a large character, the pace was such a large character. Being very true to the lead character, which is Balram, was very important because this is him looking out at all of us. This is not us looking into his story. This is him talking to us direct and saying, this is my world, and this is the time of the brown and the yellow man, and God save everyone else. And, as provocative and bold as that. And that was most important to be able to preserve. And I think Ramin has really enhanced bringing the novel to life.
Yeah, it's a really it's a very entertaining film. Like you said, I think it's like, it's like the pacing is great. I like the way the film opens and stuff, and just like kind of backtracks through time. It was, and the narration, I think all of that blends together really well to make it, like you said, like I think, a very entertaining watch, and universal in themes and stuff like that. I know I read an interview with you, I think from the other day, where you talked about, wanting to make sure there was more South Asian representation in Hollywood and in films, and how important that is. And I found this one, especially like, I think if people have maybe outdated preconceived notions of what, a film like this could be, I feel like this is like a way into that, for, more audiences who are not maybe familiar with South Asian cinema or all these different things. I guess, can you talk a little about your work there from an executive producer standpoint, and like wanting to do more of that, making sure that voice is being heard going forward, I guess?
I think you hit on a really great point, because the idea is to normalize being able to see a South Asian story um, on mainstream entertainment, just as normal as it would be to, like, walk past a South Asian in the city that you're in, and or meet them in a doctor's office, or and wherever. But it has to be, that's what diversity is, and it has to be normalized to be able to see different kinds of people on in mainstream entertainment. And I don't think a movie like The White Tiger would have been made with the kind of budget that it had 5 or 6 years ago, with an Irani director, with an all Indian star cast, with in shot in India, based on a novel written by an Indian person. And I think it's kudos to Netflix that recognizes the global reach of entertainment now. The White Tiger is going to open in 160 countries around the world, and that is insane, compared to what it would have been if it was a theatrical. And so I think, like, we have to. It's a great time for us to be able to bring diversity to the fore, to normalize different kind of stories, to create a cross pollination of cultures and entertainment that represents so many different kinds of people. And I think it's a really wonderful time, which is a big reason why I wanted to align with this movie as an EP, and add support to it so that it gets seen by as many people and consumed by as many people within mainstream pop culture. Because I think that's, having movies which are provocative and interesting and amazing, um, and not be sort of judged as South Asian cinema or a South Asian story, and just be seen as a great movie with, great characters. I think that's going to be a big win, and I'm glad that's the direction I want to sort of walk into.
Yeah. Can you talk a little more too about your role as an EP? I mean, like, were you like how involved were you when your Pinky's a supporting role, and I'm not going to spoil like what happens, but obviously like she's a supporting character in the larger narrative. So I guess like when you weren't on the set as an actress, like, can you talk a little about like what your role entailed as like an EP and stuff?
Well, predominantly my part is before and after the movie is made. The creative process was something that we spoke about, of course. The co-producer on the movie, Mukul Dora, he was also amazing to sort of collaborate with and talk about. Sarah Brennan, another EP that we had, who was there with us during the shoot. I mean, just to be able to collectively, and Ramin, of course, to collectively discuss like the tone of the movie or the cultural sensitivities around it, which I may or may not understand, but I think that was a really cool part to be able to bring a perspective, and also before and after the movie's made, to be able to make sure that it has the support to be seen and be promoted in a way that I think would make it sort of mainstream and undeniable.
You were talking about the tone. I wanted to ask too, like, were there specific, films or reference points beyond obviously the novel, like that you guys had in mind? I saw like some reviews compared it to like at least one compared to like Goodfellas, and I could see that with like the framing and stuff. Not to put like an over, not to put too much,
And the close-ups immediate, yeah.
yeah, right, like stuff like that. I guess were there things like that you guys talked about, like reference points to other, not that you're copying that obviously, but like other points
Oh,
of
of
work
course.
and stuff. Yeah.
But I think Ramin had, you should ask this question to Ramin more than
Okay.
me, because he really had an intentionality and definitely had a few films that he kind of, and Goodfellas happened to be one of them, especially when you think about in this movie, the story is such a voiceover that you see the usage of close-ups a lot to tell his story. You go from like these amazing wide shots, establishing shots to like really tight behind the ear, because it's a very intimate narrative. And I think it was very important for that to translate into how the movie was told as well. It was a voiceover. You had to kind of be in his head. So it was really wonderful to see Paolo, who's our DP, and Ramin sort of really create that as we went along every day. There was a lot of like handheld work as well, just to create this tension and the movement. So the camera was always sort of breathing and moving with us. So it was very intentional the way the camera work was used in this movie.
Yeah, and I think from a viewer standpoint, like it definitely like it gives it an energy. I think like you were saying, like the
Yeah.
pacing and stuff that really kind of comes through. I guess one last thing here before we wrap up, I just want to like you've been a performer obviously for a long time. You've done a lot of different things. Like, was there something that you'll take going forward from this performance in this movie that you'll like? Were you like, oh, like as an actor, like that's something I never thought of or never done before in a performance that I think I'll try to bring with me to the next project, let's say.
I think the one thing that I would remind myself with this project is to, be uncertain and allow myself to be uncertain in my performances, and not, because Ramin as a filmmaker really pushes you, and he doesn't give you direction. He depends on you as an actor to sort of bring what your character is thinking and what she's going to do. And he like, his favorite word is let's search, and we search for hours and we talk about it for hours, and he never says action. So it's like whenever you want. And it's a very sort of actor controlled environment. And he likes it to be that way. He loves improv. So, you have to know your character really well to be able to do that. And I think that's something I want to remind myself with all. I used to do that very often. And then I kind of forgot that along the way because I was running so much. But this reminded me again how much joy there is to actually just pause and relish understanding and knowing your character so much and really immersing yourself. It was such a joy to be able to do that.
Nice. Well, listen, Priyanka, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. The movie White Tiger is out Friday on Netflix. It's very cool. Definitely check it out. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Chris. So good to
Thanks.
speak to you.